When Chiron Speaks podcast, this is a space where we explore the healing journey. I'm your host, Sarah. This is a deep dive into the wounds we carry and the light they can become. Episode 5, The Weight We Carry, Too Much, Not Enough. So, I would like to talk about the paradox of living in the in-between of feeling like you are both too much and never enough. This episode explores how that plays out emotionally, spiritually, and through Chiron's lens, as well as how ancestral stories and societal expectations shape this wound. So I would like to first talk about the movie Ants that came out in 1998. I really like this movie, and what I love about it in particular is the opening scene. So the Ant Z, he's in therapy. Like, he's laying on the couch talking to his therapist, and he's saying that he feels insignificant, which is kind of interesting to kind of like hear an ant have commentary on their life and basically say like, hey, I feel insignificant. I feel like a cog in the wheel. And the humor in that moment is that the therapist confirms with Z, like, yes, you are insignificant. And he's like, he questions, he's like, I am? Almost like in surprise that he is insignificant, or at least that's what the therapist confirms, because not to get too much of a tangent, but sometimes, the system, or if you will, the matrix, wants you to feel a certain way about yourself, because in that way you will continue playing the role that they need you to play, So, I digress. Later in the movie, he becomes attracted to Princess Bala. And the reason why I mention this attraction is because I think attraction is so interesting, because who we're attracted to sometimes is way more than skin deep. Because while Z, the ant, he feels insignificant, Princess Bala is significant in the fact that she will be the one to lay the eggs that will make the new future colony, right? So he feels insignificant, but she feels not good enough, So they're both on the same pendulum, in the fact that he feels like he's not enough, and then she feels like she's too much, that she wants more, and she wants to be more than just the person who lays the eggs. So I just thought that was very interesting that they're doing that whole polar opposites attract about that. So I would definitely say look at that movie. It's interesting to look at the characters and how they evolve, and how they try to balance the in between of feeling like not good enough and too much, both at the same time. So, I would say some days you feel like you're taking up too much space. Other days you feel like you're barely making a dent. What if both of those feelings came from the same wound? This is not about fixing yourself, but understanding and honoring the origin of these feelings. Because a lot of these feelings are not just our own sometimes. So, to kind of recap, to go back to the theme of Chiron, where the wound lives, Chiron, in Greek mythology, was a centaur. He was half human, half horse. And he had two wounds. The first wound is the abandonment that he felt from his parents. He was born from, if you get what I'm saying, RAPE. And when he was birthed, his mother rejected him because of his appearance. He was monstrous to her because he was half horse, half human. So the first wound is he was abandoned by his parents. The second wound is that he was shot by a poisoned arrow by Hercules in his thigh. And the thing is that he had grown to be a healer. He was under the care of, I think it was Artemis and Apollo had taught him how to heal, and taught him medicine and stuff. So, even though he was a great healer, he did not know how to heal himself, because that poison, which would ultimately unalive a mortal, just caused him great pain, because he was immortal, because his dad was Kronos, which was Greek gods, right? So there's that dual wound, just how Chiron had two wounds. There's also kind of almost like a two-sided wound there. Where you might feel like you're too much, loud, emotional, opinionated, needy, shamed for taking up space, but also not enough, where you might not feel attractive enough, smart enough, skilled enough, or always falling short is the feeling. Now, Cultural and family reinforcement of these messages happen in childhood. This is where the psychology in this podcast comes up because we're speaking on generational trauma. There is like evidence-based research that we inherit things such as like talent, survival instincts, anxiety levels, personality traits, and even trauma are given from a parent to a child, not only biologically, but more specifically on the cellular level. So in other words, we feel the weight of history within our body because it is literally woven into our DNA. So that's why I implore you also to look at your ancestral history, your family lineage, your understanding your cultural backgrounds, because to be human is to have baggage. Everyone has baggage. If someone acts like they don't, they're lying or they're an alien. So, in order to kind of really understand, what is in your suitcase of like trauma and everything you're carrying, all your baggage, in order to like unzip the suitcase and really look at all the contents that's in your baggage, that's in your luggage of everything, like that will definitely help you get more clarity as to why these feelings of feeling too much or not good enough come from. So how the two feelings feed each other, it is a vicious cycle. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth. And if you're not conscious of this pattern, the pendulum will just keep going back and forth until you become consciously aware. If you become consciously aware. And my hope is that like this whole podcast will kind of let you be more conscious of that so you could actually be aware of it and hopefully break that cycle. So feeling too much makes you shrink, hide, or suppress your needs. Feeling not enough makes you overcompensate, overgive, or overachieve. So the result is that you live in a cycle of self-editing and self-sacrifice. So you kind of have to think of the feeling of either being in overflow or emptiness. So the goal is to be a cup that is full, but with just a little room at the top to prevent spills. Because either you're pouring from an empty cup, that's where the overcompensating, overgiving, overachieving comes from, or you're spilling a cup that's over full, which is the feeling of like where you feel like you're too much. You have to shrink, you have to hide, you have to suppress, you have to hurry up and clean the spillage that's on the floor. So the goal is to it's unrealistic to be happy all the time, to be content all the time, to be at peace all the time. But really the goal is to feel more of that than not at all. To gradually start to feel more at peace, to gradually feel more content, to know that where you are now is where you're meant to be, and then that's okay. You don't need to do more than enough, and then you don't need to feel like you're less than as well. It's to feel that right now, right here and now, that you are okay where you are right now. So, to talk about the ancestral thread, how generational survival patterns create this paradox. So ancestors who had to be more to survive, they had to be louder, stronger, or more resourceful. So when you think about the fight or flight response, this is where the fight comes in, where you had to be stronger, louder, to be more intimidating if there was like a threat that came on to you or someone that you cared about. Ancestors who also were told that they were too much to be accepted, so they diminished themselves. Because you have to think, like, before all this technology, ancient people had to rely on each other heavily to survive. Everyone had a role to make sure that everyone in the community was fed, hydrated, sheltered, clothed, protected, and also fostered a feeling of belonging and spirituality to reinforce the strength of the community. That's why you see, like, in almost every ancient civilization, there was a shaman who was responsible for making sure that everyone remained spiritual, because that's also another way to keep surviving, right? To look beyond ourselves and look to a higher power to kind of get that strength from. So if you did anything to anger, endanger, or if you didn't meet your quota or the expectations of the community, you would be exiled, which ultimately would lead to being unalived, right? There is power in numbers. And being alone wasn't just lonely, it wasn't just sad, but it was like your likelihood of survival went down because, like I said, everyone was an expert in their trade. Someone made the food, someone hunted, someone gathered, someone clothed everyone, someone was really good at making shelter, someone was really good at finding water and bringing it back to the community. And hopefully you're a jack of all trades that you could do all that stuff for yourself, but typically most people are not, at least in that time, were able to do everything for themselves. You know, it would make life more enjoyable if there was. That's why bartering was such a big deal back then. But anyways, I'm not going to keep going on that tangent, but you get the point of what I'm trying to say. Being alone ultimately meant you were closer to being unalived than being in a community and being protected by, like I said, power and numbers, right? So what side of the paradox do your ancestors speak to most? Being too much or not enough? Signs you're living in the paradox. So you might apologize for existing. Sorry, I just da 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 da. Or you over-explain your worth. I promise I could da 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 da. You withdraw after expressing emotion. You struggle to accept praise. This is when you might struggle to accept a compliment. Also, you feel emotionally exhausted by social interactions, even if you enjoy them. Now, this is where also, too, this psychology kind of comes into play, because if you're extroverts get their energy from being out and about, being around people, kind of like feeling the external energy around them. Versus introverts, they need time alone to recharge their battery. And even introverts, you may like spending time with other people, but the pressure of that pendulum from feeling not good enough to being too much can suck out the fun of any social situation, because you're so conscious of how you're acting and always fearful that you might be too much when you're finally around people. Or you feel like maybe because you're an introvert, your energy might be a little bit more chill. I'm not that exciting. I'm not that sociable. And you kind of get in your head and you create that vicious cycle in your head to the point where you just don't even want to go to a party, right? So, healing, the integration path. So naming the wound as the first act of power. So I think about like AA meetings or those fighting with addiction where they say the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem, or also that you were powerless when you were unconscious to your own behavior. So it can feel impossible for people to even just gain the self-awareness that they are not perfect and actually very flawed, but that's what it means to be human, you know? And it's good to practice reclaiming that space and that self-worth, admitting that, hey, I'm a flawed individual, but also kind of giving yourself hope through affirmations and making those affirmations like reachable too. You know, you don't want to give yourself an unreachable goal. That makes it that much harder to stay motivated to get better and to change. So saying stuff like I'm allowed to be exactly as I am. And even if maybe like that affirmation, you struggle to say something like that, you could just simply say like, I will allow myself to be myself, you know? Something simple like that, where you kind of give yourself the promise or the hope that ultimately you will get there. Another like example is like if you don't feel strong enough or you don't feel like you're a strong person, whether that's emotionally, spiritually, physically, I would acknowledge moments or journal when you do feel strong so that you can look back and be like, hey, on this day, I really did feel strong. Remember that feeling of what strength felt like in practice, and you could really turn it, once you kind of remember what that feeling is, you could kind of practice and kind of be able to turn it on and more often than having it off. You can remind yourself, like, I don't always feel strong, but I can be, and I do feel strong right now. I am brave enough to accomplish the obstacle that's right in front of me. And when you do stuff like that, like you're kind of building, the whole point is to build slowly, you know, to take baby steps. It's not to make a huge leap, and you're not going to feel, even like think about like if you're physically trying to get strong, you might, you know, lift a dumbbell that's 5 pounds. But if you keep consistently working on your strength, ultimately, you'll be able to work with a 10-pound dumbbell or a 20-pound, 25. Like you slowly build strength as time goes on. So compassion check-ins when you feel like you're not enough. Would I say this to a loved one? When you have intrusive thoughts that are critical or judgmental or reminding you that you feel like you're not enough, or making you feel self-conscious and making you feel like maybe I'm doing the most, just remember those thoughts and ask yourself, would I say this to a loved one? You have to distract or interrupt the intrusive thoughts that might keep you in that place. So just reframe, too much is fullness, not enough is potential. So think about your fullness. When you're full and you're expressive and you're being emotional, just that's your cup being full, and when you feel like you're not enough, there's just room for growth. There's potential there. And you have to kind of really rewire your brain to think more positively about yourself, because both are parts of your wholeness. And honestly, think about it. If you're an ever-evolving person, there's always room to grow, but then there's also times where you're too much, but the too much is like something that maybe you could give to someone else, or you could save that part of yourself for later. Kind of think of like you're just trying to get at equilibrium. Like I said with the Ants movie with Z and Princess Bala, they're both just trying to get at equilibrium, and their attraction and ultimately their feelings for each other is what kind of cultivates that. But more so, like, I want to focus more, like, don't always just focus on romantic relationships fulfilling that. And that's why maybe that's I don't know if I'm ever gonna tackle like the whole dating scene and all that other stuff on like a psychological psychic level, but I would say sometimes people are looking for external things when it should be an internal journey. So with that, I would say a good guided visualization that you could do is meeting an ancestor. Probably one that looks like you. You can envision that person and seeing that ancestor accept all of you, especially in those moments where you're kind of feeling like you're too much or not enough. And then the closing line I would leave you with is, you are not here to be small, and you are not here to endlessly prove yourself. You are here to be whole. So with that, I would just want to say thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.